Imagine being so obsessed with science that you're willing to stab yourself in the eye just to prove a theory. Sounds insane, right? But that's exactly what Isaac Newton did. He shoved a sewing needle into his own eye socket, not by accident, but on purpose. And that was just the beginning. He stared at the sun until he nearly went blind, poisoned himself with mercury, and pushed his body to the limit in ways that would make any modern scientist scream. Being a genius isn't just about making discoveries, it's about surviving them. And today we're going deep into why it sucked to be Isaac Newton. From his self-destructive experiments to his brutal feuds with other scientists, to the fact that he died completely alone, Newton's life was far from the picture of genius we imagine. If you love uncovering the dark side of history's greatest minds, make sure to subscribe and stick around, because this one is going to be unbelievable. Now, let's start with the madness that nearly cost Newton his sight forever. The man who nearly blinded himself. Newton wasn't just obsessed with physics, he was obsessed with understanding reality itself. And unlike other scientists who were content with thought experiments, Newton wanted proof. At one point, he shoved a long sewing needle, called a bodkin, into his own eye socket, not just poking the surface, but pushing it in deep, right up against his eyeball. Why? He wanted to see how the shape of his eye would change the way light entered it. And guess what? It worked. He saw flashes of light, strange colors, and distortions, essentially proving that light and vision weren't just passive experiences, but were influenced by pressure and movement. But Newton didn't stop there. Oh no. He decided to stare directly at the sun for as long as he could handle, just to see what would happen. And the result? His vision was nearly destroyed. For days afterward, he saw blinding white spots everywhere, to the point that he had to lock himself in a dark room for days just to recover. Now, most people would have learned their lesson at this point, but Newton, he kept pushing the limits of what the human body could endure. He handled toxic chemicals without protection, inhaled mercury fumes for years, and even experimented with alchemy. Yes, actual medieval magic-like alchemy. And the side effects? By the end of his life, Newton was showing clear signs of mercury poisoning, memory loss, paranoia, tremors, and mood swings so extreme that his friends thought he had lost his mind. But that was just Newton experimenting on himself. His true battles weren't just against science, they were against other people. And speaking of that, drop a comment below. Would you ever go this far for science? Or do you think Newton was just a little bit insane? The lonely genius who hated everyone. For all his brilliance, Isaac Newton was not a people person. In fact, he might just be one of the pettiest scientists in history. If someone disagreed with him, he held grudges for decades. If someone dared to challenge his ideas, he made sure they were erased from history. One of his biggest rivalries was with Robert Hooke, another scientist who worked on gravity and optics. Hooke claimed that some of Newton's ideas weren't original, and Newton lost his mind. He spent years attacking Hooke, refusing to acknowledge any of his contributions. And when Hooke finally died, Newton made sure there were no surviving portraits of him left. He literally erased him from history. But that wasn't even his pettiest feud. Another scientist, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, developed calculus around the same time as Newton. Instead of accepting that they had worked on it separately, Newton led a campaign to destroy Leibniz's reputation. He used his power at the Royal Society to publish a report accusing Leibniz of plagiarism, and he wrote it under a fake name to make it seem like an unbiased judgment. Newton didn't just want to win, he wanted to crush his enemies completely, and this level of paranoia and arrogance made him incredibly lonely. He never had close friends, he barely socialized, and he spent most of his life locked away in his studies, avoiding people altogether. Even when his mother was on her deathbed, he refused to visit her. It's no surprise that Newton had multiple mental breakdowns throughout his life. At one point, he stopped eating, sleeping, and speaking for days, convinced that his enemies were out to get him. His letters from this time are full of paranoia, almost as if he was losing touch with reality. And maybe he was. Being a genius had made him rich and famous, but it also isolated him completely. If this story is blowing your mind, hit that like button, because we're not done yet. The man who died a virgin. Isaac Newton wasn't just bad at making friends, he never even had a relationship. Historians believe Newton died a virgin, No romantic partners, no scandals, nothing. And this wasn't just because he was too busy with science. Newton actively avoided relationships. He once had a friendship with a young mathematician, but the moment the guy got too close, Newton cut him off completely. He seemed to have no interest in love, intimacy, or even basic human connection. And at the end of his life, Newton had everything: wealth, status, fame. But he was alone. No family, no friends, no legacy beyond his work. His funeral was grand, fit for one of history's greatest minds, but personally, there was no one there who truly knew him. Newton's legacy is undeniable. He changed the way we see the universe. But behind the genius was a man who suffered, physically, emotionally, and socially. Brilliance comes at a cost, and for Newton, that cost was everything. If you want more mind-blowing stories about history's greatest minds, make sure to subscribe, because the truth behind genius is way darker than you think.